going. This is recorded, so I don't have to worry about like people aren't here, they'll get it. So, tips for a stage 2 submission. This is really tips for a strong stage 2 submission. So it is trying to capture what we want to see, but also there are like the written words in the published rubric that is going to be used to score it. But try to, I'll use a few minutes to give you kind of a little bit of additional qualitative flavor about what we're looking for, the spirit with which the rubric is written. But my hope is that you'll have lots of good questions, other types of things I didn't think to talk about. So if you didn't see it yesterday or the other day or the other week, there was a little bit of a post that went out on LinkedIn that talked about how stage 1, stage 2, and the fly-off are really very different competitions. And I would encourage you to get in the mindset of these are very different competitions. So I think that many of you who submitted for stage 1, probably when you start working on your stage 2 submission for like your report, for example, you'll boot up your stage 1 report and just start editing that, which is fine, but just keep in mind that it is a different competition. And so even if you did very, very well at stage 1 and won a prize, that doesn't necessarily mean that just saying, cool, we'll just submit that again is going to do it for you, because these are different competitions. Stage 2 is really distinguished by, I'd say the big things are the things that you talk about in your report, where you can really have a strong submission, or really, I would say there are plenty of strong submissions who are going to really separate their report section about their design and their validation activities. They'll have that really separate. But some submissions are going to have a really nice synergy between those two, where the technical design report won't necessarily have to spend 2 pages talking about justifying why your analysis is correct, because you can just point to, hey, we have a video, we flew it, we know it's right, that sort of thing. And then keep in mind that this is similar to the stage 1 competition, but it is, even with the strongest story that you have to tell, and all that, without strong validation to go along with it, you don't have a strong stage 2 submission. So, tips for a stage 2 submission. Number 1, develop a competitive system for the GoAERO fly-off. I emphasis here on for the GoAERO fly-off because a lot of people, there are plenty of teams who are really developing a system and their whole program is just about winning a prize at GoAERO. This emphasis isn't necessarily for you. The emphasis is for teams who are either they are doing something else now and they're saying, great, GoAERO is a great opportunity for us, or they are building toward a product, right? They want to get fielded as an air ambulance as soon as possible after GoAERO is over, and they're doing GoAERO on the way to that. The emphasis here is that for the way that the scoring rubric is written for the stage 2 competition, there aren't added points for that. The reason being that there are plenty of teams that are only doing this for the competition, and that's a perfectly legitimate strategy. So if you are doing something else, if you're saying, we're developing this product in this company, and so we're developing this product, we're developing this company, and you spend all your time in your submission talking about that, and you say, oh, and oh, by the way, these are the things we're going to change to do GoAERO along the way, that's going to be a weak submission. Similarly, if you already have a company that's doing something, and you spend all your time talking about your company and what you already have and what you do, and you say, oh, and oh, by the way, this is like how we're going to take our existing thing and adapt it for GoAERO, that's also going to be difficult for you to tell a good story. So developing for the GoAERO fly-off is, that's just how the scoring is written for stage 2. And then tell your story to a fresh audience. Don't make the mistake of assuming that anybody who is assessing your submission knows anything about you, anything about your team, or especially anything about your stage 1 submission. Remember, these are completely different competitions, and so there is no link between them. There are plenty of people coming in new to stage 2, so don't make any assumptions that anybody knows anything about your program. So when you're telling your story, make sure it's very clear and crisp. What does your system look like? When you say what your system looks like, really make clear what you plan to bring to the fly-off, right? Again, this is the same thing, the previous point about make it clear what's for your fly-off. Now, if you are talking about, and then how does it work, of course, what can it do, right? Saying like, okay, these are the capabilities. And then talking about why the way it is, that's where it's legitimate to say, hey, we made some decisions and this decision was influenced by what we already had or what we plan to do after the fly-off. That's okay, that's a legitimate reason, but that story needs to be told in the context of of the system you plan to bring to the fly off. And then the why should we believe you point, that's really about, that's where I talked about before, where your stage one submission, really you were only allowed to back that up with, you should believe us because we have analysis and things like that, and simulation. With stage 2, you will be able to back that up with hardware tests that you've done. Could be flying model tests, could also just be ground test stand type of things. But convincing the people who are reading this, like, hey, we have this thing, it can do all this stuff, okay, do I believe you? So make sure that that's in there. And then a big part of this is, do we believe that you will actually get this done, what you say will do? You've crafted this wonderful vision, you told this great story about how you've made certain design decisions about this will be the best system for getting to the GoAERO competition. Well, do we believe you that you can make it? Do you have the resources? Do you have a plan? Do you know what your risks are? Don't forget those programmatics. They are a significant number of points in the scoring rubric. And then once you have that, build the submission tailored for the stage 2 competition criteria. So if this is just a screenshot from the website where you can go and get these documents, they look like this. So this is the scoring rubric that anybody can go look at. This is too small to read, and then I just pulled a screenshot out of, you can get a preview of what the stage 2 submission, the specific things you're going to be asked to submit. What I'll emphasize here, you probably cannot read it, and I'm not going to hot swap HDMI cables here, but in the concept validation, the intent here of the scoring rubric is for, first of all, for you to be making good progress and maturing your system and de-risking your program, that you should be able to take what makes sense for doing that now and turn that into strong validation sections of your submission. So yes, you do need to fly a minimum scale flying prototype, but if for you, validating that your aircraft configuration can take off, translate, come back and land, it's like, oh, our configuration has totally proven, there are tons of examples of this. That's not going to do a lot for the people who are judging your submission, saying like, okay, cool, they validated that configuration can work. What can bolster that submission is going to be able to say, oh, here are all the other high risk things that we're doing a lot of work, simulation, hardware, ground tests, things like that. Other teams have a high risk aircraft configuration, and that's going to be a big focus. It's showing that you can take off, maybe do transition if you have a vehicle that needs to do a transition. And generally, the point breakdown for that concept validation part, it's about a third, so 40 out of 140 points is for that concept validation, and it's about half-half. So half of that is what you're doing actually representative of the system that you plan to bring to the fly-off? So this comes again to, all of this is in the context of what you're going to bring to the fly-off, because in the context of the competition and scoring, that's kind of the only scope that we're looking at. So in the context of your system that you plan to bring to their fly-off, is what you're doing and submitting for this validation representative of that system? How close is it? And that's another thing with that you have to be careful of if you're already a company and you're already established and you're saying like, hey, this fly-off is a great opportunity. If your focus is only on what you've been doing, the thing that you plan to bring to the fly-off looks a lot different, even if it shares a lot of systems and things like that, then you're going to want to make sure that that's where you're going to have to work a little bit harder to gather those points for it being representative, to make sure that you clearly communicate the differences and why even if it looks really different, why it actually is a good validation test. And then the other half of that is, what have you done to validate the full scope, the full breadth of all of the capabilities that you are going to need for the GoAERO fly-off. So just take, a good example is a vehicle that needs to transition, but you've only demonstrated this bare minimum taking off and hovering and no transition. Well, if you're claiming that your vehicle at the fly-off is going to do a transition to forward flight and it's a tail sitter or a tilt rotor or something like that, then you haven't done that, then you have some work to do, or you're going to have difficulty gathering those points. That's all I have. So that's good. If there are no questions, I'm totally fine with that. I'll emphasize that a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about there was a webinar that we did on the stage 2 submission, where that one goes into more detail. And that's where I screen shared and kind of went through piece by piece the submission. Yeah.
So my question was, if you were figuring out how to allocate your resources and you had to choose between doing more like real world flight testing with your scale model or full-size systems that are gonna be in the final file, or conducting simulations, for instance, on your full-size model, where would you, or do you have to do both, or what would you emphasize if you had to make that choice?
It's entirely program dependent on what you're doing and what makes most sense for you. And if that is what makes most sense to move the puck down the ice or ball down the field, or sports analogy here for you, then that's what's going to make sense. You know, an example could be, we need to validate static stability. That could be done with a wind tunnel model. That could be done with CFD. It could be done with simpler analyses. It could be done with a flight test campaign of slowly moving the center of gravity until you understand you have an instrumented aircraft. It could also be done by, we 3D printed a 3D model and we threw it off the roof, and yep, it's statically stable. Doing what makes sense for your program that's kind of the best advice I can give.
Okay, so like if our submission was real world heavy and lighter on the computer simulations, that might not hurt us as long as we're able to prove what we want to prove using that method.
Right. So that's kind of comes into when you're telling your story of how you develop, of like your system. You say, hey, this is the system you're going to fly off. This is what we claim it will do. Substantiating those claims can be done through a combination of analysis and test data that makes sense for you, right? And that's the difference between the stage one. Is in stage one, the only tool you had at your disposal was like analysis, whereas now you're kind of allowed to say, look, we just went and flew something and we validated it empirically. The stage one competition was intended to be an equal playing field for everybody, including those who, like, hardware was intentionally not supposed to be in scope of the scoring there. And so, and that was actually made it harder for teams that most of their validation was real world, and they didn't have, they were analysis light because that wasn't built into the scoring. Similarly, I don't know if you saw the table before, but still for stage one especially, but it still remains for stage two, that a big part of the assessment is your story, like showing that you've done good engineering. A lot of it is process, and that's the big difference. Like the fly-off doesn't have any of that. We don't care about your story. It's just, who has the best score. Stage two still has that storytelling, and so you might have a very, very mature system, but if you might, like, a perfectly legitimate strategy for GoAERO is sourcing a lot of components that other people develop, but then you have a harder time telling the story of how that part of it was developed because you didn't develop it. So that doesn't matter for the fly-off. Sure, use as many off-the-shelf components as possible, but if big components of your system you didn't develop, then it's going to be harder to tell that story around it. But that said, you can emphasize different things of what you are doing.
So the question is, do you have any guidance or suggestions around we use like ChatGPT on some of the wording, and is that going to be frowned upon? Does it kind of sound, you can kind of tell, but is that something that we should definitely avoid, or is something okay, or like, is there like a people have like different reactions to that kind of thing? But any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you might have answered your own question, where your audience can tell, and knowing how to use large language model generative AI tools is knowing, you can tell who knows how to use it. If you know how to use the tool well, your audience will not be able to tell. But naive uses of those tools are when you say, like, write me a report about this that's about 13 pages long. That's when your audience is going to know that there's nothing behind that. Using large language models for proofreading your grammar. I would say go toward, if you want to use those tools, closer to that end of the spectrum, for things like, or something like, if you're hitting the page count or the word count, and you have like a couple of sections that are like, oh, these are really wordy. When I say, hey, make this more succinct. Those are the sorts of things that those tools can be really good at, where all of the actual knowledge and information is still coming from you, and it's just really used to help you communicate clearly in the English language, like the idea as succinctly as possible. That's the sort of thing those tools can be good at. But if you're asking it to generate justifications for things and things like that, GoAERO has done a wonderful job of recruiting judges for these competitions who are definitely smart enough to see through that.
So in the blog post that you had mentioned, online, teams that were able to validate in flight at or near full scale.
Mm-hmm.
The most validation points. Since I know there's often some other teams, it is going to be possible to do anything really anything more than the 35, 40% of
Mm-hmm.
model. And there's obviously some differences between that 35 to the 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to be able to make up some of that gap using the quantitative analysis and simulation, or like smaller bench tests, cross tests, like that, to call out what that we recognize what the differences might be, and this is how we know that we'll be able to overcome.
Totally, and in fact, that's kind of expected. If you look at the submission, it's like there are explicit places where it's like, hey, talk about how this is different from your final system, and you can include. I think there is a page count limit, but basically you can include your similitude analyses to show, hey, this is how we know it's different, and it's encouraged to say, hey, here are the other things you've done. Ground tests for some of our full-scale components, for example, and then again, the scoring for it does have those two halves. So somebody who's flown full scale, but just a hover test, that sure, if they're claiming that's the exact system they're going to bring to the fly off, that's cool. But then you're going to want it, but that is leaving a lot out of it. Whereas other teams are going to have something that is subscale, maybe even not that representative of what they plan to bring, but maybe they're doing a very sensors and avionics and software heavy entry. They're going to put a lot of, and they say like, yeah, it's like, then they say, oh, those are the same avionics we plan to put on the big thing. But they're flying that around, and they've done a lot of activities with it that show that their algorithms work, things like that. Then that's how you have, different types of approaches to stage 2 that both can get pretty good points for the validation activities. I have no idea what time it is. I'm pretty sure I spoke quickly.
You did. You always do, Sky, but that's one of the things
Sorry about that.
we appreciate. So, as you are looking at the stage 2 submission and you have questions and you're preparing for it, you can always reach out to us. Once again, the info@goaeroprize.com email is the best way to reach us because we get to route it to the proper person, whether it's someone in communications or someone on the tech side or whatever it is. We would encourage you to begin working on your stage 2 submissions sooner rather than later. I believe Nidhi probably said to you already, but you heard Nidhi say it multiple times. You can save your stage 2 submission and you can keep adding to it and all of that. But do not wait until the last minute for anything, whether it's stage 2 submission, whether it's becoming a stage 2 team, whether it is planning your flights for the fly-off. Do not wait until the last minute. I cannot tell you how many times we encounter that both for GoAERO and especially for GoFly, where we have hardline dates that there's nothing we can do about after. So get your stuff in early or at least on time. Give yourself enough time to have mistakes along the way. I promise you there will be some. And so make sure there's enough time where it is not an end point for you upon where you cannot recover for that stage. Of course, you can always go into the next stage without having completed stage 2, but so much better doing stage 2.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So tactically, think like, okay, here's the deadline. You want to have something into the Hero X platform in all the fields on the order of like weeks before the deadline, not days or hours. And then you can say like, cool, as we're working on this up to the last minute, we can still update this as something good. But like, if the clock runs out, at least you have something in there. So just be in that mindset of like, get something there first, and then you can always. Engineers love working up to the last minute, and it's good, right? You like, I think it's a great forcing function. It forces you to like, improve as much as you can up to the deadline. But just make sure that, like, by doing that, you're saying like, cool, my login works, like that. You don't want to say like, cool, I got an hour left to the deadline, I've got all my content laid out, and then you're like, oh, Wi-Fi's dead, or whatever.
Fields of character limited, that's what
Right, yeah, those things are really important to consider. And remember, this is vastly different, as Sky has mentioned multiple times since the stage 1 submission, right? There are lots of videos you're gonna have to upload. There's a lot of, information that you're giving us that's going to be different than stage 1. So those things take time to get into the system. You wanna make sure that they're all set up properly and things like that. So make sure, that your videos work well, that you're putting them in the right places. You're not actually uploading them to HeroX, you're uploading them to YouTube or Vimeo. So you wanna make sure, you've got your setups okay, that people can actually see the videos. Don't set them as, private without giving us a password, those sorts of things, right? So test all those things, make sure that they work on the back end so that when the judges do look at the submission that, they can easily access it. Because once it gets to that point, unfortunately, we cannot help you,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, little things like, oh, here's our video link. Like, open up like a private or incognito browser to make sure that that works as you expected as somebody else, and that other people can view it. Yeah, and like video uploads can take some time too. So like a last minute 200 megabyte thing, 200 gigabyte video, or like whatever you want. Because we are asking for, in particular, the one of the videos to be an uncut video, which in some cases there might be like 15 minutes of nothing going on, but that can be a lot of data that you need to upload to YouTube. So just like the logistics and the IT of it, don't underestimate that.
Is there a cost associated with getting the submission in like stage 1?
No, there is no submission fee for stage 2. There is, however, the stage 2 registration documents.
Yeah.
Okay, so keep that in mind. That all needs to be submitted beforehand. And that also, as Gwen mentioned, takes time. Those things do not happen overnight, okay? So you can't just go get a legal entity in 24 hours, expect it to arrive to you. So make sure those things are taken care of in advance. You've done this properly. You have your proper name registered. Again, Global Aerospace told you yesterday, yes, they can expedite things, but give them time, give them a week, give them 2 weeks in case there are issues that you need to update on your application. So do not wait until the last minute to process these items.
Right. And I think that, there are services like, at least in my state, like Inkfile or Busy, yes, you can pay a fee to get it expedited, but that just means they're going to mail it to the State Department that day. It's still like, there's still humans in the loop there. It's not like all online instantaneously. Here it goes. And then the insurance application, my understanding is that is also humans are involved in reading that and assessing that and saying, yes, you can have insurance. So, and yes, they can go quickly. It's not like the months lead time sort of thing, but if you're serious about GoAERO stage 2, do it now. And the costs to incorporate and insurance premium are the bare minimum costs to participate.
Other questions?
Cool. Well, I'm
Leva,
really
we
looking
put you
forward to
guys
seeing
at,
your stage 2 submission.
450.
So.
Yeah.
What's it, 450?
Oh,
No
just their
worries.
video.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, if you don't have any further questions for Sky at the moment, you can always ask them at a later time.
Yeah.
But do take his information quite seriously.